Hi, my name is Michael Chikeen. The smartest people I've met have one common belief that us silly humans really don't know much. For example, we still don't know why planes stay in the air, or how Tylenol or even gravity works. Yeah, gravity. Look it up. In today's distracted, clickbait, misinformation age, I wish we could all be less certain, more humble, and a lot more curious. Admittedly, I've been known to struggle with all three. So no more, no less, this show is my attempt to be that change. Thanks for joining me, and here we go. Hey everybody, welcome back. Today in the virtual studio, I have with me Eric Degatti. Eric has been a coach, trainer, and mentor in the fitness industry for the past 25 years. He has taught fitness professionals inside organizations such as Sinai Hospital, New York University Medical, the Navy SEALs, the Mayo Clinic, and many major universities. Eric also appeared in the New York Times bestseller, The 4-Hour Body by Tim Ferriss. His list of training clients include individuals who have been Olympic gold medalists, All-Americans, national champions, World Series champions, and Pro Bowl athletes. Eric is the real deal. He recently launched the Ageless Athlete Blueprint and an interactive coaching program for active and competitive males over 40 looking to train and compete at high level while staying injury-free. So today, we're going to dive into all things fitness and durability. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Thanks for being here. I haven't done a lot of fitness-focused episodes, and I really hope to change that. It's been a huge part of my life for years. So I guess mimicking that we're in the gym, I guess let's do a couple warm-up quick questions. What do you think?
Let's go.
So what would you say is the most popular, ineffective supplement you can think of?
Popular, ineffective. Okay, that's
Yeah,
a great question.
that a lot of people are taking, that's just garbage.
Okay, so basically anything that says fat burner on it isn't a fat burner. Okay, so there's no such thing as a fat burner pill. Um, you can't selectively do that. If you can, you have a scalpel and you can charge a whole lot of money. You can't selectively pull fat. And so all of those pills are a complete waste of time. Most of them are just really stimulants, so you don't eat all that much because basically you're not going to undo the laws of thermodynamics. And there's very few things in science that are laws. There's theories and there's hypotheses, and then there's some laws. And the law of thermodynamics is that if you take in more calories than you burn, you're going to gain weight. And if you take in less calories than you burn, you're going to lose weight. So if I have a pill that gets you to eat a little bit less, well, then you're going to lose weight. You're not burning fat. And if in all cases, you may actually be losing muscle.
That's great. Okay, and let's see, what is the one exercise you'll never stop doing? Oh, you're cutting out a little bit.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
I would say, hmm, if I had to pick one that covers a whole lot of stuff, it would be some variation of the deadlift. Now, before everybody gets scared and thinks about, okay, I'm thinking of heavy barbells and chalk and spit and blood and cringing and wrenching on your back. That's not necessarily what I mean. It's just basically your ability to hinge your hips and lift up something that's from below your waist. And so there's a lot of variations of that. And so some variation of that is going to cover a lot of ground from your mobility to function to strength. Even I can carry that over into your athleticism. So there's a lot of carryover in that. So that would be kind of one that would be definitely in the top five, if not pretty much a staple there.
Okay, what would be a variation on the deadlift? Because I used to deadlift a lot when I was lifting super heavy, maybe 15 years ago, and I found the mechanisms for myself a little bit awkward. So what would you like the hex bar or something, or maybe the T bar lifts? What would be a good variation on the deadlift?
So yeah, the trapper hex bar is a great variation that kind of makes it a whole lot easier for the people because it puts your hands at your sides, and that completely changes the mechanics and the demands of it. Where most
Okay.
people don't have the structures to get into a good position for a barbell deadlift, and even if they can, we have to modify that. So there's two primary variations. There's one where you put your hands outside of your shins. That would be called an Olympic deadlift because that's kind of the setup for one of the Olympic lifts, like you'd see in the Olympics of the clean and jerk and that kind of thing. And then there's the sumo deadlift where you go a little wider stance and your hands inside your legs. So for me, as an example, someone who has short, stubby arms, it's really difficult for me to get into a good Olympic deadlift stance. So I don't do a heck of a lot of those, but I will do a sumo deadlift. Now the trap bar makes it even easier because regardless of your structure, I can get you into a really good position in a trap bar. But there's also variations we can do where we can use a kettlebell. I love a lot of single leg deadlift variations because that has a lot of carryover to a bunch of different things. Plus now you're incorporating balance and stability into there. So that's also a real good avenue we can go down that checks a lot of boxes because again, I look at things more in terms of patterns than I do parts. Is instead of saying, okay, I want an exercise that works this muscle, it doesn't really work that way. You got 400 muscles, a lot of with matching sets on both sides. If you worked something for every muscle, you'd be there all day. Whereas if I can work a pattern and what gets covered in a deadlift, and this is why it's probably one of my top ones, is pretty much everything, right? You're going to work your
Mm.
grip, you're going to work your shoulder stability, you're going to work your core stability, you're going to work your core strength, depending on your loading. You're going to work your hip stability and or possibly mobility. So there's a lot of ground covered there.
Okay. And how's the T-bar in comparison to the deadlift? Because now you've already just convinced me that I need to put the hex bar back in, or the trap bar back into my workout. But how's the T-bar for that?
T-bar as a deadlift would probably work a little bit better for what they call a Romanian deadlift, which is more where you're not getting as much knee bend and it's more just a pure hinge at the hips. That could work. And realize that you don't necessarily need to do everything in isolation, even in terms of patterns. So if I go into a T-bar and I do a bent over row, well, now I'm getting a hinge. I'm basically doing a static deadlift, holding a deadlift position while I'm getting a pulling motion. So I can kind of get a 2 for 1 there. So
Okay.
one of the biggest challenges I have with people, and it's regardless of whether you're a professional athlete um, or just a weekend warrior, is that time is your biggest challenge. You know, even when I work with
Mm.
teams, time is our biggest challenge. So I don't have time to isolate every single pattern, every single part, and every single aspect of training that I'm looking to get to. So I have to try to combine things to get a lot of bang for the buck. So in the case of a T-bar, if I'm doing a bent over row, well, now I'm kind of covering two things with one shot.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Um, what I don't know if this is your domain, so you feel free to pass. What sport would you recommend everyone at least try
Hmm.
for fitness and longevity and things like that?
Okay, well, that was my next question. Okay, what are you looking to accomplish? In terms of sport, sport is so specific in terms of people's preference and what their liking is, and it's such a cultural thing that
Mm.
it's hard really to pick a sport. Whereas, you know, if you go anywhere basically outside of the U.S., and for the most part, they're going to immediately say soccer. And soccer, you're getting so much out of. It can be scaled to your ability, where you have, you know, smaller fields, you have 3v3, you have 77, and all those different options. So there's a lot of scalability in there depending on your age and your abilities and all those things. So it is really the, you know, the beautiful game in that it can be adapted in that way. And I know I'm going to make a lot of fans over where you are in Europe with that answer. And so that would be, you know, as far as a sport. Now, as far as activity, it doesn't necessarily have to be a sport, but one thing that what people don't think about a whole lot that I'd love to see more people do is sprint. Now, I don't mean go right now if you've been sitting on the couch,
Wow.
jump up and start running, you know, 100-meter repeats. That is not what I'm talking about. You need to build up to this and you need to make sure you have the prerequisite, you know, movement abilities and mobility and control and so forth, and then gradually build up to it so we're not popping hamstrings and hip flexors. But once we can get to that point, there's so much that can be gotten. If you, again, if you're giving me the desert island list of top 5 things, sprinting's going to be towards the top as well, right? Up there with deadlifting and some other ones. And because sprinting covers a lot of boxes. You could use sprinting for developing, obviously, speed and power. If you're looking to build athleticism and so forth, and that's also important not just for athleticism if you're going to go on a field, but also one of the biggest things we lose as we age, even more than our fitness, even more than our muscles, our power is our fastest diminishing attribute. And power, when we think of power, we're thinking, okay, I'm thinking of somebody doing some explosive thing in the Olympics or on television.
Yeah.
Power for somebody who's an older individual is, can you get your foot out in front of you fast enough so you don't fall and break your hip.
Wow.
Power is your ability that If you start to fall, you can catch yourself. Those sorts of things are power as well. So and that's something that we lose the fastest. And so there's great elements of that. And then if I take that sprinting, I can also use that as a great conditioning tool. A lot of times when we think of cardiovascular work and conditioning, we're only thinking of kind of steady state. I'm going to put on the television and just go for at a steady pace for a while, or I'm going to go out for a run and I'm just going to put on my headphones and just go at a steady pace, which certainly has its value, but there's different compartments within cardiovascular and aerobic training. And one of those compartments is a more high intensity that unfortunately not enough people get to. And that helps build our ceiling. That helps build our what's called our VO2 max, which is our maximum ability to uptake oxygen. And they've found that that may be one of the biggest predictors of longevity. So figure out a way to get your body able to handle sprinting, and that is a incredible thing that I love to see people do, and it's incredibly empowering to just go run as fast as you can. We did it as kids, and we lose that ability.
That's really interesting because preparing for this interview, I was thinking, because I know you work with a lot of people over 40, which I am, about mobility, fitness, and durability. And so I'm surprised that soccer, for example, or sprinting is on that list. I would think, soccer after 60, you're just going to roll ankles every other day. But I've seen, as for sprinting, I've seen people, maybe it's just on Instagram or whatever, that are getting super fit and still doing sprinting later on. So how old do you think you could be to still do those two activities?
It's really not an age thing. It's a preparation thing. The
Okay.
client that I had that just left still plays very high level competitive soccer, and he's in his mid 40s. And so one of the ways we built him up to be able to do that, so you're not the guy rolling an ankle or pulling a hamstring,
Right.
is doing a good solid movement program and strength and conditioning program, and then part of that is doing sprints. So a simple example. This isn't something where you got to go get track spikes and get a coach to teach you running mechanics. It could be something as simple as where you space out yourself over 30 yards, and you take the first 10 yards and you kind of gradually build up your speed, and when you get to that middle 10 yards, you kind of let it rip a little bit, and then you take another 10 yards just to slowly coast and slow down. You
Hmm.
turn around, kind of catch your breath, wait till you're fully fresh, and then you do it again, and do that as little as 10 times once a week, and it's going to have huge payoffs. And so if you can regulate your speed in the beginning, so you can kind of build up, and then eventually you get more trust and you'll get more capacity to get better turnover, you can get a little bit more aggressive with it. And that's going to be the thing that saves you from being the weekend warrior who yanks their hamstring, trying to run for a ball, because you've just never prepared your body for that speed.
Wow. Okay. And I guess that segues into another question I have about mobility. So I played tennis. I started up again a few years ago, and I really couldn't love it anymore. And I had a slight tear in a rotator cuff in October, and I got all the ultrasounds, got a couple PRP injections, have been doing rehab exercises, and now I've been back on the court for a couple of months now, and I'm feeling great. And so, aside from the rehab stuff, I think what has really helped me, like I feel now I'm playing even maybe better than when I left, because I bought this mobility program off of this personal trainer that I saw on Instagram, and it's really helped me open up my hips. Like I don't think my hips have ever had so much mobility, and my shoulders feel better than they've ever felt before. And I didn't realize, because otherwise I used to take martial arts, so I'm fairly flexible. I had no idea that I needed to do all this mobility training. Could you speak to a little bit about how important mobility is in athleticism and longevity?
Yeah. So first thing is we lose our mobility over time primarily because of our habits. Our movement is just a habit, and it's a response to our environment and our the daily shapes and postures and positions we put ourselves into. And most of us, unfortunately, are strapped to a desk and chair for the majority of the day, and that's going to create some adaptations and stagnation in a lot of different areas. Three key areas in particular. One is your ankles. Two is your hips, and three is your thorax. Basically, if you took, from your bottom of your ribs to your shoulders, and then inside that, your rib cage, your thoracic spine, all of that basically will get locked up from sitting all the time. And so those are the three areas we want to primarily address. Now, from there, we also have to understand mobility is going to have a much longer lasting effect, and it will stick longer if you can actually control that range of motion. And so the to explain that further is, if I popped open my treatment table right now and I laid you on there, Michael, I could stretch you for the next half hour. And there's facilities that do this, stretch you for the next half hour, and you're going to feel amazing when you get up. But by the time you get in your car and drive home, you're going to start regressing back to your original range of motion. And the reason is, I've created what I call naive range of motion. You don't know what to do with it. And so your body's always trying to protect itself. And so it's going to go back to what it feels safe and comfortable with. And so it's going to regress back to those tighter positions. And so you need to create mobility that you can actually control. So that doesn't mean static stretching is bad. Static stretching has its place. But if you're going to loosen one part, and I always give the analogy, that's kind of telling your body what not to do. It's like, okay, I'm going to tell my hip flexor, I don't want you to be so tight. But then that might have been one of the only things stabilizing your lumbar spine, because that's where it attaches. And then your body said, okay, well, if you're not going to give me something to stabilize my lumbar spine, I'm going back to the hip flexor. But if I can say, okay, well, no, now that we got that opened up, let's teach you how to stabilize around your hips by creating better hip and pelvic stability and better core stability. And then once you can get better stability and control, it allows that mobility to actually take hold and stay there. And so
Right.
just laying there and stretching, if you stretch all the time and you're like, I don't get any looser, yeah, that's because it's not going to stick. I also use the analogy of like tuning a guitar. When you see someone tuning a guitar, they don't just loosen all the strings or tighten all the strings. They listen to each string and say, okay, well, this one may need a little bit of tightening. This one may need a little bit of loosening. And there's some people who are actually too loose, that actually have too much mobility, especially if you have a history of martial arts or gymnastics or something of that nature. And
Yoga.
some people just naturally are a little bit more hypermobile. And so those people, I don't want them stretching. I need to give them better control so they can actually get mobility, because their body's putting on the brakes and not letting them move to protect them again. And so it's incredibly important that we have it, because if you can't get into certain positions, well, then you can't create stability. And if you can't create stability, well, then you can't create strength. And if you can't create strength, then you can't create speed and power. And you just kind of, everything falls off of that. And so it also limits your menu quite extensively. And we can go deeper into that if we want to, but it limits your menu pretty extensively as far as what I can prescribe for you in terms of exercise.
Huh. Well, that's really good, because I know my left hip has been historically super, super tight, and I thought that's just how it was. And now, since I've been doing these exercises, it's like, every other day I've done like mobility 101. Now I'm doing athletes mobility, and the 90-90 stretch.
Yeah.
So when you're in that, and then the leg that's behind you, I've been slowly training to move it up further and further. And when I first
Yes.
started, it was on the ground. I'm like, okay, this leg's dead. This hip's finished. And now, like 6 months later, I'm getting like 45-degree movement on it, and it feels so much better. But it makes sense what you said, that it's lucky that I've been working out and playing tennis during this process, because as I was loosening it up, if I wasn't also tightening with exercise, then that might have turned naive and caused me problems. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and then to where that can create an issue is what that's specifically looking at is that is the what's called the internal rotation of your back hip. And so
Mm,
if you don't have that, you have higher likelihood of a knee injury. You
okay.
also are not going to be able to rotate as well, because now if your hip can't internally rotate, let's say if you're a right-handed if you're doing if you're a right-handed tennis player on your forehand, and you go to plant your left leg and you go to swing, well, if that left hip can't internally rotate, you're still going to try to get the ball to where you want it to go, right? So you're just going to figure out someplace else to get that rotation from. And so it's either going to
Right.
go down or it's going to go up. It could go down and create some issues in your knee. It could cause you, if you're especially if you're doing tennis, you're doing the move. If you can't rotate your hip, you're a little more stuck. You're more likely to roll your ankle, or it could go up. It can end up where you show up and say, I have low back pain, and you've been treating and icing and heating and stemming and doing everything for your back, and it's not getting better because it's really a hip problem that your problem is coming from.
Okay. Do you sell any mobility programs?
Yeah, so not specifically just mobility, because what ends up happening is, and there are some people who do a really good job of that. People like Kelly Starrett is brilliant, and his programs are phenomenal in his Ready State, app, if you're looking for just mobility stuff. But mobility is a staple of what we do. I program, and I don't even necessarily call it just mobility, Michael. I call it movement,
Mm,
because it's just basically getting you to do fundamental movement to the level which you need to. And when I say level what you need to, let's say if we're working on the rotation of your trunk and thorax, there's a certain amount of rotation you should have as a human being. You should be able to turn, roughly 45 degrees or so. But if you're going to go be a golfer and you're going to swing a long metal shaft really explosively a couple hundred times over the weekend, you're probably going to need a little bit more than that. And
Right.
so that's where I may need to cater it specifically as to what it is that you need. But fundamentally, yes, movement is a big part of that. And when we work on movement, I look at it, I program what we call movement snacks. And it's to work on, I tell people it's to work on your movement hygiene, meaning that this is something that should be 5, 10 minutes every day. Just like you brush your teeth. You brush your teeth. Why? Because you don't want your teeth to fall out. Well, you do your movement hygiene because you want your body to stay intact and be able to remain functional. And so it can be done in just one 10-minute thing that you can do beginning of the day, end of the day, whatever it may be, or you could space it out throughout the day. You could take little bites of that snack all throughout the day. And if I gave you 6 exercises, you could do one, on your next break between calls, and you can do one on your lunch break, and you can
Sure.
do one on another break, and just gradually just keep your body primed and moving and kind of teaching it. Because again, movement is a habit. And so we have to train that habit, and doing an arduous stretching program for an hour once a day isn't as effective as doing little movement bites all throughout the day.
I need to find a ways to do that, especially if I'm like I have a standing desk now, thankfully. But normally I'm sitting down, either doing emails or writing or something. So it's a good idea to. I'm going to try to see what I can build into it because I bought a program called I think it's like the Mobility Framework .com, and it's really basic. And I think after I'm graduated from that, I think I'm ready for more of a little more intense program that you guys are offering that does movement and weight training and resistance and everything like that. That's great because I was going to say to get into some ideas for how we can help people before we get into like durability after 40. I want to give people a little shot of value for like let's say someone wants to work out for 3 months and see some really big results in terms of body composition or endurance, etc. But let's say there's two people and one has never done resistance training in their lives, and another one is more athletic and active, but they want to see some big changes. How would you coach those people differently?
Okay, there's a couple different things that you can consider there. Is that one is that in one regard, the experienced person, I have more of a wide-ranging menu to go by because that has already been built into their software a little bit as far as the training in their nervous system. So they're going to get a little bit more, and I'll have a little bit more freedom within there. There's an old expression that Tudor Bompos, a sports scientist, used to always say, soon ripe, soon rotten. So if I have two people who do the exact same program, one has been training for 5 years, the other one's been training for 5 months, and they both take 2 weeks off, the one with the longer training age or training history is going to have less of a loss of their training because it's residual. Training is something that builds over time. It's not one rep, not one set, not one workout. It is a conglomeration of all the workouts you've done over a lifetime. And so
Huh.
that's going to be one difference. Obviously, the new person, they're going to see much bigger changes in terms of their strength because their nervous system is not exposed to it. And so the first time when you start a training program, you're going to see much bigger changes where you'll see the numbers jump much more significantly in the beginning, and then they're going to hit a hard plateau because if it didn't, we'd all be deadlifting 1,000 pounds. But
Right.
that's where there'll be the two changes in there. The bigger thing is looking at not just the variables you gave me, but looking at all of the variables, because I can't fully answer that question until I know what is it that these people do all day. What does their lifestyle look like? What does their nutrition look like? What is their stress levels? What is their sleep? Because it really depends on what your recoverability is, because training is just the seeds. The analogy I give everybody is this, Michael. So all we're doing is planting seeds for a harvest that comes down the road. It's not like we go and do a set of bicep curls or a set of sprints and we're magically with bigger biceps and better cardiovascular fitness. It's something that accumulates over time. And so if I go and plant seeds on the rubber flooring here in the gym, nothing's going to grow. I need fertile soil. Now, what's the fertile soil that provides your your training response, it's all those things that I mentioned: your ability to manage stress, your nutrition, your hydration, your sleep. All of those things are key. So are you giving me a rubber floor to plant seeds on, or are you giving me fertile soil? Because that tells me how much I can push it, because it's really on a both a micro and a macro level, the essence of training is to be challenged and successful. And what I mean by that, the whole reason it works is that if you go and lift heavy weights, your body goes, oh my gosh, I don't know what you just did. But if you're going to keep doing that, I have to get a little stronger. I may have to build some muscle and get more neural input into those areas, because if you're going to keep doing that, and that's going to be way too hard to do every day. So I want to make it easier. Everything we do is to adapt. If it was really hot, we'd sweat. If it was really cold, we'd shiver to warm up. And so you're constantly looking to adapt, so you become more efficient. If not, we would have been, dead a long time ago. And so that's how we've survived as a species. And so I got to know how much I can push you so you're challenged, because if you're not challenged, you won't change. But I also have to be successful. So if I have those same two, if let's say I have two people come in and one has really poor recoverability because of stress, poor sleep, poor nutrition, and so forth, and the other one doesn't, I can't push this first person as much. And so they're not going to get the same response. And so I can only challenge them so much where they'll still be successful. And that's a sweet spot. And on a micro level, it could be even within a set. If I ask you to do 10 repetitions of something and you get to 10 and you're like, I could have done probably 10 more. Well, you were really successful. You just weren't challenged. And it's not going to make enough of a change. If you got to 5 and your form, completely blew up, or you just couldn't move it anymore, well, you were really challenged. You just weren't successful for what we needed. And that sweet spot's right in the middle at the edge of your ability. Well, we can move that edge further based on your recoverability and what you do the other 23 hours a day.
Right. That's great. I love how holistic that is, because it really does matter exactly the rest of everyone else's life. And if they can't push it, because you have someone coming in I remember I see someone in the gym who's 65 and it looks like they just started working out, and the trainer's giving them like box jumps and Bulgarian split squats and all these things, and you see them like almost suffering to teeter over, and I'm ready to race over and help this person up off the floor. So it's good that there's trainers out there that are really aware of what the limitations are for some of them their clients, and take a full assessment for what they need. As far as you mentioned rep range, because I know a lot of people will lift for strength and go between 0 and 5, and then others will go between 8 and 12. Now, is there any risk if you're lifting more for power and strength, if you're doing reps 0 to 5? Is there because it's so much weight, is there a chance that you're using muscles you shouldn't be using because it is so heavy? Or what's the thought behind that?
And not if you're doing it right. So there's
Right.
kind of 3 boxes to check. There's one is competency. Competency is, do you even have the ability to get in the position that you need to get in to do it properly, right? If you have really poor trunk mobility, really poor hip mobility, you might not even be able to get in the position to grab the bar for a deadlift, as an example. And so any coaching that I do after that is falling on deaf ears. So first, I got to make sure you have the competency, you have no limitations from that standpoint, that you actually have the movement ability to execute this. The next box is skill. Do you actually have the exercise skill? That's where good coaching comes in. Do you know the difference between a good rep and a bad rep? Do you know all the cues in terms of setup to get yourself in the right position, in terms of execution, all the way through until that rep is done, what that should look and feel like? And then last but not least is capacity. Is that when we get into trouble is, well, and where I probably should have put a 5 on the bar, I put a 10 on the bar, and I pushed myself beyond, or I went and got that extra rep that I really had no business getting, or maybe I could normally get that rep, but because I got a crappy night's sleep the night before, I'm not getting that rep today. And if I push through it, that's the day I tweak my back. So you have to kind of look at all of those things. Going 1 to 5 is really not the problem. The problem is most people don't check all those boxes. And so unless you've checked those boxes, that's where it becomes a risk factor. And then it's almost actually safer for some people, even beginners, to go as little as 5, especially on a more integrated complex movement, because once they start to get some fatigue, the first thing that's going to fatigue is their stabilizers. Their form's going to go to pieces. And so I'd rather have them doing sets of 5 versus sets of 10 or 15, where they might not be able to have the stability and that postural endurance to hold good form for that long.
Right. Man, I love the flexibility in the protocol for someone coming in. I remember a friend and I speaking years ago, and they said it's not so important how much you do in the gym. It's more important that you show up and have that habit, because, like you said, if someone has in their mind that, well, in fact, I wanted to say I like that you have this for all of your advice. You have this real holistic, but also mind body connection in play, or to say if you didn't sleep well, you're not feeling well, but you had it in your mind that you're going to do 4 sets of 12, but you're just exhausted, like, just do as much as you can and then leave, opposed to overdoing it. Otherwise you're going to risk injury and then you're out for months. Is that typically what you're telling some of your clients?
And it's the 100% trap that people fall into. It's the it all starts Monday type of mentality of
Mm,
I'm gonna go all in. And look, I remember when I was younger, I did it too. Me and all my buddies watched Rocky, and then we got up at 6 o'clock in the morning and drank raw eggs and tried to run a mile, and then we threw up and went home and were so sore for the week that we didn't do anything again.
right.
And so um, until the next time we watch Rocky. So the 100% trap is, I always tell this great statistic that I got from a brilliant man by the name of Dr. John Berardi, who's the founder of something called Precision Nutrition, one of the best nutrition coaching companies in the world. And we talked to him on my podcast, and he talked about where they did statistics on over, tens of thousands of people that have been through his program, and they looked at just how compliant they were with the program. And what they found was is people who had as little as 20% compliance, meaning they only followed the program prescribed 20% of the time, still got results. The only thing that showed when people failed is when they didn't keep showing up. So even if you did it, you're supposed to do it 5 days a week and you only did it one, you still got results. Now, obviously, as you committed more, you got better results up to a point. So people who did it 40% of the time got better results in 20, and 60 better than 40, and then 80 better than 60. But once you got to 80, the difference in results from 80 to 100 were not only minuscule, but some of the people who tried to do 90 and 100 actually had more stress that was, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze for that 100%. So that's why I tell everybody, I'm going to have you follow the 80-20 rule. Whatever I tell you in terms of nutrition, whatever I tell you in terms of exercise, if you follow it 80% of the time, the other 20% of the time, you're going to have some grace. And you'd almost rather have that, because everybody that that's ever done all in on whatever Hollywood diet it was, or whatever newest fad training program they're going to do, they go all in, and they very few of them last. I mean, the statistics show that 60 to 70% of people drop out of the gym within the first 12 weeks.
Right.
And so that all in mentality doesn't work. And so I'd rather give you some grace and say, this is what I'm looking for, and over the long range, and you will get better results at 80% than you probably will at 100. The only exceptions to that are going to be if you have a deadline. Now, if you have a deadline and you say, and a deadline, what I mean by is, okay, well, I have to be ready by this date because I'm working with an athlete, and that's the first day of the season. That's when their fight is, or their opening match, or whatever it is.
Right.
They're not going to change that for them, so they have to be ready by it. And if they're not, if and so we may start them at 80%, and as we get closer, if we're not ready and we're not on track to be ready at 100%, for a couple of weeks we may need to go at 90 or 100%, but we're going to go back to 80 once the season's over, once that event is over.
Right. Now, is there anything to be said for Berardi's principle that, or his studies that found that if they did 80%, it was as good as, not as good, but close to 100? Is there anything to be said that maybe they should just design the programs as 80% of what the 100% is, if the gain is so minuscule, so then people can feel like they're doing all of it and they're not only doing 80%?
No, I think it's important to make people part of the process and empower them and get them to understand that it's okay, that you don't have to be, because it's, again, it was the stress of having to do it 100%. Because I think if you did that and just adjusted it down, people are going to feel stressed doing the 80% that they think is 100%, and they'll do 80% of that, right? So
Okay.
it's the more of the stress of thinking, and there's a great book that I just finished by Bornstein. It's called "You Can't Screw This Up," and he talks about the stress. As soon as we say, I don't care what it is, it's the if it's the no prune diet. Even if you think prunes are the most disgusting thing in the world, as soon as I tell you you can't eat prunes, your body just has a natural curiosity that maybe a prune might be good right now, and why can't I have a prune? And uh, did I do something wrong that I don't deserve a prune? And like all those things are going to come into your head that it's just so much more
Interesting.
stressful that it's not like I said, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. I'd rather have you understand that it's okay. You just got to get back on the horse and keep showing up tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess how let's get more into your specialty for fitness and durability over 40. I know I feel probably better today than I did for most of my 20s. And I think a lot of that is through health and fitness. And I barely take any supplements. I just sleep well. And so, what's some of your protocol for, let's say, someone coming into your gym that's in their early 40s and they wanted to get into great shape?
So here's the interesting thing, Michael, is the protocol doesn't really change. The protocol, and so when I look at all the limitations that could potentially pop up. So one of the other things that I do is I also train trainers. I train trainers and coaches all over the world. And so when we teach programming and say, okay, well, if you're going to write a program for fat loss or for just general fitness, we could write a pretty good generic template. But then what's going to happen is a real person is going to want to do that, and that real person is going to have some limitations. And those
Okay.
limitations could be time being the most important one. It could be that they have certain movement limitations. Maybe they have that left hip that doesn't move well, or the ankle that doesn't move well, and I have to work around that. Maybe they have limitations in terms of space in what they can work within, or maybe they go to a big public gym where doing a circuit of strength exercise isn't going to work at your big public gym because as soon as you leave
Mm,
one piece of equipment, someone else is on it. Maybe it's an equipment limitation that they have that they don't have. There's a lot of different things that could be limitations, and that's going to alter the program. One of the limitations is not age. I've never used age as a limitation. And so
cool.
I have clients that are doing some amazing things into their 50s, 60s, and 70s that most people wouldn't consider, safe or healthy for them to do, but they'll prove you otherwise. And so I think
Wow.
the first thing that I change in the protocol is letting them know, number one, is that age is not a limitation, and most importantly, you're not broken. um, and by the time you get to, and I'm 52 right now, by the time you get to my age, you've probably been told that you have, a bunch of different itises and you have this in your spine and you have this in your hip, and you can lean on those and you can use those as a scarlet letter, or you can say, you know what? So what? So does everybody else have it. If we do MRIs of just about any human being in Western civilization in modern times, you're gonna find something that can scare the hell out of you,
Right.
or you can understand that, okay, well, do I still function well? Do I still have enough movement? Do I still feel enough baseline fitness and strength and all those things that, okay, I don't care what my MRI says, because if 90% of the people have something on their MRI, most of them are asymptomatic. Most of them are walking around just fine. They don't even know it. And
Right.
so why should that be a limitation? And so that really doesn't affect the programming one bit. It's relative to where you're walking in at, what is your recoverability, and what is your goal, and then what are those limitations do you have? Is it, from time all the way down?
Right. Even I think it's these shadow limitations that we don't even know we have. And so it's either mental or it's physical. Like my left hip is a perfect example. Like I've been playing tennis and sports and doing all these things for years, and just I realized my left hip was a little bit less mobile. It wasn't a problem, but it was less mobile. But now when I'm doing this mobility program, and it's really changed how much rotation I can have, how mobile it is. Like my tennis game has gotten better. My recovery time for ab exercise has gotten better. I have less hip flexor situations, and I had no idea that it was affecting it like that. So I think I think that resonates really with me, that we can't just think it's, oh, I'm just getting older. That's just how it is. Yeah, it's not. It's just that you're not moving enough. Have you seen any like really impressive results from people that came to see you that were a little bit older, that are now are crushing it athletically, that they doing things that they never thought they'd be able to do?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you tons of specific examples, but
Sure.
as a general thing, what I tell people is when they come in and let's say, I'll give this because that's the time with a specific person. The low hanging fruit is low back pain. Low back pain is the most common thing. It's the second leading cause for people to call out of work next to the common cold. All right,
Wow.
low back, you're not hard to find people low back pain. And when people come in and say, "Oh, my back hurts because of," and they'll start the laundry list of excuses and blame game,
Hmm.
because of my mattress, because of my office setup, because of what I do at work, because of lifting too heavy, or because of an old football injury. They'll go through this whole list of things of why they think their back hurts, and I'll say to them, "What have you done to not make your back hurt?" And they'll go, "What do you mean?" I said, "Have you done anything specifically to not make your back hurt?" And they'll go, because you're giving me a lot of reasons why what are things that you do to make it hurt, but you haven't given me a whole reason what you've done to not make it hurt. Like, do you do regular mobility work? Do you know what areas that you need to work on? Do you have,
Yeah.
like, and so that's a reframing of it to say, okay,
That's
well, if,
amazing.
and so it's like, okay, well, no kidding, your back hurts. Well, you're not doing anything to make it not hurt. It's the same reason why if I go out and try to golf and I stink at golf, you know why? Because I don't practice golf. I should stink at golf. And
Right.
so to tie those two together, so I have a guy who comes in. I actually trained his son as a professional football player that I train. He came in because he was having a ton of low back pain. And usually when they get to me, it's because they've tried everything and nothing has worked. I've tried acupuncture, I've tried chiropractic, I went to the orthopedic, I've gotten cortisone injection. This guy had done all of that.
Right.
Still no problem. And I mean, this guy's one of these guys who just lives for golf. And now I can't drive the ball. I can't finish 9 holes without having to shut it down. And it's like and so now here's the bigger challenge. And this kind of ties in with the whole over 40 thing is now he's lost some of his identity. He was known as the super fit guy who was a scratch golfer. Now what is he? He's just an old guy. And so I got to change all that. And that's the first place where we start, and then get him to gradually change. Now, it wasn't like he comes in. I'm not the guy you come in and you're going to lay on a treatment table and I snap my fingers and do some voodoo and you're going to walk out and you're going to be 100% better. I have some magic tricks in my bag, but ultimately it's not going to stick. And you don't own that until you can basically create it. And so it took some time, but over probably about a couple week period, he got the relief where he wasn't, in agony and he can get through his day. And then it was okay. You're not going to go back to playing, 36 holes, 72 holes, but here's what you're going to do. You're going to go out and you're going to just go to the range. And I want you to take 25 swings and see how it feels. And then we're going to build up from there. And then, okay, let's go out and shoot 9. And let's build up from there. And then we're going to build up that capacity to it. And then also along the way, just understand that you're going to get a little frustrated because you're going to a game that you played for 50 years with a brand new body and a brand new nervous system that I just reprogrammed and rebooted. And so you're probably going
Right.
to suck at golf for a little while. And he did. And he couldn't find a swing. And I worked back and forth with his golf coach as far as some of the flaws he was seeing in his swing, trying to figure out, are they physical things? Are they skill things? And then gradually turned it around. And then I start getting texts of like, I hit the ball like I used to today. And then it was, I played 9 like I used to today. And then it was, hey, I just shot 81. And now now this is a guy who's, this isn't a, 35-year-old PGA Tour guy. This is a 75-year-old guy who's now playing golf multiple times a week. He's his fitness program, he's religious with. There's not a movement limitation that he has. There's nothing that I wouldn't give him in terms of exercise because he has any movement limitations. He sprints on the treadmill as far as part of his, our conditioning program. Um,
75?
it's 75. He's doing sprint intervals on the treadmill.
Holy shit.
The other day we do, as part of kind of some of his testing, we came in and I was just finishing with another one of my clients who's in his 60s who still plays competitive tennis. He was doing one of the great tests for a lot of different things is a straight arm hang, right? Just double overhand grip at shoulder width and hang from a bar. And generally minimum is we look to get about 60 seconds. Tells me that you've kind of hit the mark there. If anything higher is just kind of bonus. And the guy who's in his mid 60s, hit like a minute 3. And the golfer that I'm telling you about was on deck. He was my next client after that. He's like, how long did he get? Like, I did it in a minute 3. I did it in minute 3. He goes, I'm effing beating it. and he gets up there and he hung for like a minute and 20 seconds at 75.
Oh, right.
And so, that's why I don't see, like, you tell me age is a limitation, I'm gonna introduce you to this guy.
I love that, and that's exactly what I want to see. I'm playing people in tennis that are like maybe early 30s, and so their endurance is good, but I'm keeping up, because I really like that idea of like keep pushing yourself, because it's unless you're pushing yourself too far, like you said, where you're either fatigued or you're just doing something you shouldn't be doing. Because the last thing it sounds like, at least from what I read about you and what you've been saying in this chat, is that injury is what you really want to prevent. If you're not injured, then you can keep improving and all these things. Is that really what you focus with on your clients, like injury prevention, as you kind of scale up ability?
Yeah, it's with anybody. I tell if I'm working with a high school team, I tell you my number one goal, I should actually say my number two goal is improving your performance in the game. My
Okay.
number one goal is you got to be in the game. No one's ever scored a touchdown. No one's ever hit a home run. No one's ever,
On the bench.
got a basket from the training room. And so I got to keep you out there. Now, look, things happen. I can't prevent injuries. Things are going to happen. You
Right.
could, a bunch of different things can happen in sport, especially the level of contact that's in it. You could be in soccer and someone steps on your ankle, you get knocked around. The guy I just told you about earlier, who's in his 40s, who's a soccer player, he has some aches and pains, but you take a couple elbows to the ribs, you take a kick slide to the shin. Those things are going to happen. That's kind of life. Those things happen, but it's really the building up the durability of to say, I'm not going to let my own body get in the way. Um, Being the case, and that it's kind of going through this methodical approach of making sure you can move well first, and then you can move actually with intent. And so the only disadvantage you're going to have against those 30-year-olds is they have their nervous system is a little more ramped up. Okay, they didn't lose that speed and power yet. That's why most athletes will retire in their 30s, 40s, because they can't generate the same power unless they can figure out a way to be crafty and know the sport better. So that's why the biggest thing I encourage for people over 40 is to train speed and power. Smart, but train speed and power. And then, so if you can develop all those attributes and stay within your lanes, you're going to have a pretty good case to keep yourself healthy, provided you don't slip or fall or get knocked into or any of those types of things.
Okay, so I guess one selfish question: if how would I train speed and power for tennis, for example? Because in it, I thought like just doing it and playing people that have a good fitness level would train my speed, because they're hitting me all over the court. I've got to accelerate. I've got to slow down. I've got to do that. And in the gym, like I, yeah, how would you prescribe training for speed and power for a sport, for any racket sport, I guess?
Okay, so there's a couple components to that. One is you can only accelerate as well as you can decelerate. I'm only going to put enough horsepower in that vehicle to that I have the brakes that can handle it. And so the most important thing, and this also carries over into your injury prevention, is the biggest thing we train first is your brakes, your ability to decelerate. And so those are simple things like being able to do, you're hopping from an athletic stance on one leg to an athletic stance and on the other leg, and being able to stick and own that without wobbling or falling and those sorts of things,
Okay.
and being able to do it in a controlled manner and doing it in a bunch of different directions. So that would be one thing, is different ways we would train your deceleration, your ability to put on your brakes. The second aspect I would look at would be from the most low hanging fruit is looking at the tempo of your repetitions. It's something that most people don't look at. If I prescribe an exercise to you on my app, you'll see that there's little numbers that say EPCP on there, and that's just fancy for eccentric pause, concentric pause, meaning how long I want you to take to lower it, how long that pause should be, how long it should take to lift it, and how long the pause should be again. And so the easiest way to start introducing some of that work is, let's say you're doing, everybody knows a bench press is pretty common. So if I just lowered it down 4, 3, 2, 1, pause for a second, and then went up as fast as I can, pause for a second. So that way I know I have control. I'm not out of control. I'm pausing on either end, and then control it down slow again. That's a simple way to start introducing a little bit of getting your nervous system to learn how to move fast. And then from there, if I get really good in those constraints, I might want to get a little more adventurous, provided you have the movement ability and capacity to maybe start doing a little bit of jumping or sprinting Or if you have access to medicine balls, we can start to do some different medicine ball drills. Or if you have
Right.
kettlebells and you can learn things like a kettlebell swing, those are ways we can start incorporating power and speed into your nervous system. So you just get to learn what it feels like to not just move from point A to point B, but move with intent. And then we can get super fancy where I even have equipment where we can measure your intent. We can measure the speed of the bar or measure the speed of your movement. And now you have a meter in front of you that says you just moved at, zero point 0.8 meters per second. I want you to try to beat that on the next rep. And so we can, start at the most simple level and work all the way up to complex.
Wow. And how important is it to have a trainer? Because obviously, to have a good program or someone like I can imagine how helpful it would be you to come into your gym or have you come into my gym and watch what I'm doing and name the 40 things I'm doing wrong. But how, for someone who can't afford that, for example, what could they do to have as close as possible to the real thing?
So the misconception is that you need to have that trainer coach 2 or 3 times a week, and you're doing the math in your head like 2 or 3 times a week, and like when does it ever end? Because I always want to be fit, so like it, I can't afford this forever. And that's some people have that. And if you have the means, some people do that. But I don't even work with people so much in that capacity unless it's concentrated situations where I have an athlete who's getting ready for a season. Most
Hmm.
of the people that I'm seeing are on a more of a coaching basis where you come in and I'm going to do your evaluation, figure out exactly what it is you need, give you your program, and then follow the program on the app. And it's going to have videos that walk you through the exercises, tell you what to do, what your correct form should be, how many reps you should do, how to log it, and all that stuff. But you don't necessarily need to see me every single time you're there. Maybe a little bit more concentrated in the beginning, especially if you're a beginner, you're not comfortable with how to do some of the movements. But at some point, I should become more and more obsolete, less and less necessary. And if not, I'm not really empowering you. You're still dependent on me. Now, that's a little different for some people. Some people need a trainer to get them to work out. I'm not that guy. If there are people that are really good at that in terms of motivation and accountability and so forth, I have the accountability piece, but I'm more of the person for someone like yourself who says, I'm already working out. I just don't know what to do. And so here's what to do. Okay, now do it. And, and checking in with them as little, as much as once a week or as little as once a month to get that program updated and tweaked may be all it is. And there's a lot of, very achievable and affordable options for that when you're looking for a trainer or coach. A great coach understands that if I do my job, I'm empowering you and you don't need me for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I really, really like that because then you can go in and check in with the trainer and you can ask them all the questions you have from all your other exercises and they can say, okay, watch me deadlift because I don't deadlift here, and you can tell them what's wrong, and then you can go back and continually tweak. But that's something that would be also more affordable if you get a trainer for 1 hour once a week or even another other week. At least you're making it seems like something better instead of just staying at the same level. Is that kind of what you're trying to get people to get to so they're making some improvements?
Yeah, and the magic really is in the program. It's not so much um, in the exercises or any of that. It's you're not paying me for that hour for the workout. You're paying me for the 25 years I figured out what to do in that workout.
Right.
Because I know what's going to work. And whether I stand there with you while you do the workout or not is not so much important to me. The important thing is that you do it and you get results. And if you need me there to get the results, maybe that's an option, but generally most people don't once they've kind of gotten the training wheels off and they've gotten pretty comfortable with it. And so no, that's exactly kind of the model that a lot more people are moving towards because it's something that's much more sustainable over time. I'd rather see you 12 times over a year than 12 times over 3 months and I never see you again.
Right. Fair enough. And I guess because where we started as well was about garbage supplements. So where would you? Because I'm not. I think there's so many garbage supplements out there that cost so expensive, greens drinks or powders, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and I was wondering, so what supplements do you think are effective if we talk about like minimum dose? Like I only started like the pure creatine a couple of years ago, and that's been a huge benefit to me. So I wonder if you still are one of those proponents of creatine, if there's anything else that you think is worth people trying.
Yeah, before you even said it, I was going to say creatine is something that they found from basically everybody after puberty until death, because it has so many benefits beyond just, what people think of just like this bulking up mechanism. And it's not even just that. Like it
Yeah.
improves obviously strength, it can improve muscle mass, but there's tons of research showing now how it improves brain health, recovery, all these different things that it has. And it's been proven to be safe a million times over. The beauty of it is that the most effective form is the simplest, just simple creatine monohydrate. The general rule of thumb is just 5 grams for most people. Obviously, you need a little more or less depending on your size, and the situation. But that's a pretty good staple that most people should have and will have benefit from. It's not just male bodybuilders; it's kind of everybody. Um,
Mm.
and then other ones from there, the challenge with supplements is that there's not a ton of research in it because there's not a lot of money to do the research. The trade-off that they made with the government was that you won't regulate us. But then they said, okay, well, fine. Well, you can't patent your stuff. And when you can't patent stuff like a drug company can, you don't spend the money on research and development. And you also don't have a whole lot of oversight. And so if you and I wanted to make Erica Michaels, creatine in our basement, we could do it, and there's not going to be a lot of oversight into what gets into that. And so that's why you hear about athletes who will fail drug tests because there was contaminants from different things because there's very poor oversight. So if you do look for a supplement, you want to look for certain things within that. And there's other people that are much better than me that can talk to this. Pratik Patel, I had on my podcast. We talked quite extensively about this, about how to look for the good supplements and versus other supplements. Or if you follow him on Twitter, he's a brilliant guy when it comes to nutrition and supplementation. But other than that, it's more goal specific. There's some pretty strong evidence on omega 3s and fish oils, provided you can get a good quality fish oil. There's a lot of strong evidence of that, and as long as it doesn't contradict any of the medications that you're taking, that's something else that people can derive a lot of benefit from. Um, and then from there, something maybe with something to help with gut health, some kind of prebiotic formula would also be something to look into as far as just like simple basics. And then anything from there is going to be case by case basis.
Right. And how did you? Because you seem to have a very very, like, again, I keep saying it, holistic and reasonable approach, which I think a lot of trainers that I've seen online or in the world don't really seem to have. So where do you think you've come from? Eating those egg whites with your buddies at 20 years old when Rocky beat Drago or or whomever to now. Like where did your evolution in this process get to? So now you can fish out what's nonsense and what's most effective.
From screwing it up. 25 years of doing this allows you to see what's worked and what's not. And so it's not theoretical. I've seen it work firsthand. I've done it. I've seen it work with everybody from NFL players to 75-year-old golfers, right? So and so you see what each situation is real life, because unfortunately, a lot of the fitness quote unquote influencers never actually trained anybody in their life. They just picked the right parents, happen to have really good genetics and really like working out, but they've never actually trained another human being, right? And how I train you, Michael, may not be the way I train myself because you don't have and there's a good chance there's nobody in the world that has the exact same parameters that I have and limitations. And so I have to account for that. And if I don't, then you're just mimicking and copying things off you see on YouTube. And so that's one of the challenges there. So you have the fitness influencer who never trained anybody. And then the other part of is you have the people who are in the academic side of things. And we need academia, we need research, we need those people, but they also don't always have the practical interpretation and, boots on the ground experience either. And so we have to take that for what it's worth and then say, okay, I'm going to see what this study says. I'm going to then incorporate that and see if it actually holds true with real people who are not 20-year-old college kids looking to make a couple extra bucks in a study, and see, does this actually work with a 45-year-old mom who's got 3 kids, who's running all over the place and overstressed and still has a job and all those other things. I need to see if it actually works. And until you've done that, you don't really know until you've done it and tried it and see what works and what doesn't.
Right. That makes me think about like so the spirit of the show, no more, no less, is that the more we learn, the less we realize we know about the world. And so I'm wondering about through this 25 years of experience that you have, what's one thing that you or a few things that you were a believer in that you thought were like gospel to use a religious term, like that you when as you kept learning and making mistakes that you had to let go of because you realized you were wrong.
That's a great question. So I guess, it's this balancing act between, I could write programs with the best in the world, in terms of really making something super, super specific to exactly what Michael needs. But at the same time, I have this dichotomy of that versus if I can just get Michael to do anything, right? It's a win, right? And if Michael does, so the example I always give is we used to have a guy in our one of the last facility I rented space out of. We used to have a guy who used to walk around the complex, and he was an older gentleman. He'd walk every single morning around the complex, and he would stop in front of the glass door of our facility. And he would stop and he'd just march in place. And it was a little off-putting and weird at first, and it's like, what's going on? And then I had this epiphany. It was always happening at the same time because I always had the same client at the same time. And I had this epiphany like, I'll take that guy's program over most of the top strength coaches in the world. You know why? Because he keeps doing it. Didn't matter if it was rain or shine, if it was hot or cold, he kept doing it. He was always there. And so there was a magic to that. There's an elegance to that. And so the art of really good coaching is getting people to to do it and keep doing it is just as important, kind of going back to everything we talked about, as what they actually do. And so I kind of have to balance both ends of that and say I can easily get down a rabbit hole, of going into super, super nichey stuff as far as what you need in your program. But if you aren't going to do it, it doesn't matter.
Right. Wow. And that's actually a really good summary of the conversation as I want to be respectful of your time. Whereas, so it sounds like, and tell me if I have this correctly. So because sometimes maybe we have our own ego that says, I know this perfect program, this is going to work for this person, this is going to do it. But it's important to let go of that and realize if this 45-year-old guy comes in and he's only doing 20% of my program, it doesn't have to feel like a failure as long as you can support him to keep coming in, because then eventually maybe he'll do 25 and maybe he'll do 30%. So are you saying that like it's important to change the mindset or perspective of trainers to say, as long as you can keep clients working out, that's the goal, opposed to adherence to the specific program?
Yeah, and the challenge that trainers and coaches have with that is because they need to understand first and foremost, when you're talking about junk supplements, how you know a junk trainer? When it's about them, right? And if you go
Amazing.
because you're going to the kettlebell, specialist or the powerlifting specialist or whatever, well, unless I'm specifically going to learn kettlebells or powerlifting and I just want to get better, then they're making me be them. It's not about you. It's not about me. And that's one of the other things of the wisdom you get over doing it for a long period of time is, quite frankly, if you walk in the door, Michael, I really don't care what I do with you. I really don't. I have no vested interest whether you do mobility work, whether you do speed work, whether you do, powerlifting. I've coached so many of those things so many times that it really doesn't matter to me. I have no vested interest. Like, it's not like the deadlift commission sends me, a percentage check every time I do a deadlift. Like, I really
Right.
don't care what you do. And so once you can get to that point, then it's like it's just about you, right? What do you need? Where are you at? And okay, you only did it 20% of the time. All right, let's figure out what do we need to do next week to get it to 30%. What can we do? What's a strategy we could do to get it to 30%? Whatever that is. And so
So
that makes
good.
it about you. It's not about me. And so that's how you know if you have a junk trainer or a coach. And it should be about trying to figure out a way to get wins. And you're not always going to win. It's okay. As long as at the end of the year you have a net win. Um, some weeks you're going to chalk up a loss. It's okay.
So for trainers out there, it's about serving the clients and not serving their egos.
Yeah, which is tough in this business when you're, posing shirtless on Instagram every other day.
Right.
Because generally, if you're doing that, you got a pretty big ego.
Right. Amazing. Well, I guess to wrap up, is there anything that you want to leave the listeners with, that's something maybe we haven't covered that you think would be, great for their health, or something that they could pay attention to?
Yeah, so I do a fair amount of these in a lot of public speaking, and so um, sometimes I have the beauty of having a live audience or people that can interact with me. But in situations like this, the beauty of technology is I could be talking to you across the world and having this conversation, and then having that spread to people all in other parts of the world. But someone sitting listening to this in their car, or they're on their walk, and they're like, oh, I wish I could ask this. So what I did is I put on my website, if you go to my homepage, I have a thing called Ask Eric. And so you just type in a question, anything training related, and that goes directly to my email, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible with either an answer or a resource where to find that answer. And so that would be the one thing I'd leave people with, is to say, okay, if you have questions, ask people. And so, and get your resources. And I may not be the resource. I may tell you, go do Kelly Starrett's mobility program, or go get nutritional counseling from Pratik, or go, do something else. But at least get you in the right direction, so you're not scrolling looking through influencers who've never trained anybody.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I will have all of your websites in the show notes, or wherever people's watching this on YouTube. But for people listening, Eric's website is Eric, ERIC, Dagati, DAGATI.com, and he's all over the place. So you'll find him, and go ask Eric. And man, if his answers are even anything close to this conversation, you're in good hands. So Eric, thank you very much for this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. I appreciate it. A great time. Thank you, Michael.
So thanks for listening to No More, No Less. I appreciate the time you spent with me today. So please subscribe and rate the show if you enjoyed it. It'll help me create more amazing content and get that next little bit of validation that I so deeply crave. If you did enjoy it, well, that sucks. But to make sure, I think you should listen to my next 10 episodes and then decide. I mean, come on. Rome was not built in a day. I'm just getting warmed up here, guys. So thanks again. See you next time.